You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 3rd of February 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program, we are at the World Government Summit in Dubai. We'll hear from our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, and from a diplomatic advisor to the President of the UAE.
The attractiveness here is also, you get like 2 months or 3 months worth of meetings in 2-3 days.
Bit of a Dubai takeover at the top of the show. After that, we head to France. Monocle's Claudia Jacob is here. And Claudia, we finally have a budget.
That's right. We'll be talking about what's in the budget, the key compromises that got this through, and which party will ultimately profit from this deal.
Thank you very much, Claudia. We'll have that and other France stories. After that, we'll also look at the Chinese luxury market and whether it's due for a rebound after a challenging couple of years. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Welcome to the show. Happy Tuesday, everyone. We're going to start today's show with a bit of a takeover from the World Government Summit in Dubai. Monocle is there. We've got a pop-up radio studio. We've got a cafe, editorial staff on the ground as well. And among the team is our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, and our head of radio and another host of this very show, Tom Edwards. Tom has been gathering Tyler's thoughts on the opening day of the summit. Take it away, Tom.
Well, Tyler, listen, very pleasant to chat to you under some UAE sunshine instead of the leaden skies of Western Europe. That makes a nice change.
That makes a nice change, and it's just remarkable because it was my first outing here last year. It is absolutely rammed. It's just, I love seeing all of the epaulettes. There's a lot of good hats, a lot of good braiding, and of course a lot of good toes as well, because we're also in the seasonal change here. There's still a lot of golf gentlemen still in an on sneaker, a loafer, but I'd say there's actually more sandals out now. So that means that the men's manicuring business or pedicure business is booming right now in the region.
There's been some cracking military fellas, as you said, epaulettes, and some serious looking military personnel on the ground.
Absolutely, and then a lot of military people, a lot of defense people not in uniform here as well.
Well, Tyler, look, this brings me to the more serious business. I think regional security, global security obviously looms very large, and we are in a moment for the wider Gulf region. You've only been here for a couple of days, but just give me a sense of how, what kind of lens does that mean? Anyone who's attending here, whether they're a corporate, whether they're in government, what kind of lenses are people looking at things through at the moment?
I think smart lenses, because there's certainly a lot of focus on who's going to be the next with AI eyewear. That's certainly a conversation, something we might have on air. No, I think that people are trying to get a read. Is this going to continue to be a zone? And I'm talking primarily about the GCC. Will this continue to be a zone of relative stability? Of course, we know that there are tensions in Iran. At the same time, while we're even on air, of course, discussion of a framework between Washington and Tehran. Let's see what happens there. But I would say I think the mood is a buoyant one, and I think we have to sort of park politics to one side. But it was interesting. I was chatting to the CEO of boss, Daniel Grieder, a little bit earlier, and he was just talking about the energy, and he said, and Tom, you referenced, okay, it's great being under sunny skies here in Dubai. He was also just talking about the general sort of sunniness of just people, the energy, that people are keen to work, the service ethic here, all of these things, and I noticed that as well when I touched down on Saturday evening. It's buzzing. You go into hotels and it's just heaving, and it's not just with tourists. It is locals as well, and you do see that the world is coming here. They built it. They created an airline or airlines as well. We have to not just talk about Dubai, but also Abu Dhabi, and the world is coming here for commerce. They are coming here for, obviously, diplomatic discussions, certainly, like it's here. And that's what's amazing. I mean, I'm just looking outside from our little perch here. You have lots of delegations going by. You see security people. You see people from North Africa. You've got certainly a lot of Europeans here. But I've seen Mexican delegations. So you do have the whole world here. And this is where it's interesting, around our cafe. I was going to call it the Monocle Majlis because we had the chief of police of Dubai. I don't know what they were doing. It was I don't know if they were planning stakeouts. Do they have stakeouts here? I don't think they need them.
Espresso.
They were just enjoying the coffee. But I think that's what's interesting is of course it's the side conversations that happen here. There's so many events outside of this, so many dinners, etc. And of course, like as ever, that is where the business is done.
And tell me about the opportunity then, Tyler. Even if we look at this, from your sort of personal point of view, what is the opportunity? It's funny, you were also talking to not just leaders of business, but you spoke to the president of one of your motherlands. There are a few. This is a multiple passport holder we're talking to. It's also an exciting opportunity just to have those conversations face to face, right? They're very good at that here.
They are, and they're very convening because, I think we do have the prime broadcast media location. We are bookending the staircase, which takes you down to a media village.
We're looking down on the other media.
We're looking down on the other media, and we are sort of protecting the pass down to those other organizations. We are the welcome wagon. We are many things, but this is what's incredible. We've got Chinese television, Bloomberg, a variety of networks next door, and here's the one thing I find here that it's just. Again, let's come back to the sunshine. People are just in a good mood. Everyone's very friendly. There's less formality, and we've literally just grabbed people on the way in, and people are happy to talk around a mic, and that's the beauty of radio. You don't have to. Well, you've got headphones on like that. You do have to worry about your hair, but that's about it.
There we go. The big issue is always front of mind. Tyler, good to catch up. We'll lure you. We won't grab you. We'll lure you back on.
Lure me back.
For more updates during the week.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much to Tyler and Tom for that. We will be sure to lure Tyler Brûlé back onto our shows in the coming days. Monocle is at the World Government Summit all week doing interviews and meeting officials from the worlds of business and government. And we want to hear now from one of those interviews as well. A little earlier, Monocle's Gulf correspondent, Inzamam Rashid, spoke with Dr. Anwar Gargash. He's the diplomatic advisor to the president of the UAE. Inzamam began by asking how he would sum up an opportunity of convening the World's Government Summit.
I believe that for you to be a convener, you have to do several things. You have to have a network of relations. You have to have content, so people come and want to hear about various things, etc. The idea, I think, came up many years ago that not only private sector has to congregate, but it's important also that governments also congregate and at the same time learn from each other about opportunities, missteps, successes, etc. I think the third important thing also is you keep doing this over the years because building an institution needs repetition. And so I think what we see today in terms of good conversations, in terms of people who are coming, who everybody wants to meet, is about also building an institution. Now, the attractiveness here is also, if you're diligent, you get like 2 months or 3 months worth of meetings in 2-3 days because you could actually do that.
Your Excellency, you mentioned conversations there, and obviously this summit in particular makes conversations very much possible. Just this morning I was seeing the president of Estonia have a sideline conversation with the Prime Minister of Latvia, for example. But conversations is very much at the heart of how the UAE does diplomacy. I want to touch on the last week in particular. You've been very busy bringing together 3 countries that haven't yet had a meeting until Abu Dhabi did this last week, the United States, Ukraine and Russia, for the most crucial trilateral conversations. I just want to get into and understand how the UAE managed to do that and how those conversations have gone.
Good question and interesting one. And I think to start with, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we took a position to be on the side of international law, but at the same time, in terms of various international fora, etc. But I think at the same time, we took also a position not to take sides, to maintain our relations with Ukraine and to maintain our relations with Russia. At the time, I remember checking the numbers, we had about 20,000 Russian residents in the UAE and about 16,000 Ukrainians. So we took measures like basically extending residencies for Ukrainians who were going through a crisis, etc. And, we were criticized heavily for doing that because everybody wanted us to take sides. Why are you doing this? How come you are on Russia's side, etc.? And I think our argument stood. The argument was very clear that what we really want to do is we want to be helpful, not rather than be just a number. So I think as what people expected would be short-term crisis extended. I think the good offices of the UAE started in some of the humanitarian work. We actually managed to sign a free trade agreement with both Russia and Ukraine during the war last year.
So then can I?
But if you just allow me,
please.
And then we did a lot of prisoner exchanges between Russia and Ukraine. About I think over 3,000 prisoners from both sides were exchanged. It created a certain what I would call positive feeling about the UAE and about it being a sort of neutral venue. I think what happened later is we had a shift also in the American policy from the Biden administration to the Trump administration towards Ukraine. So clearly here the Americans had a different approach here, and they also are very confident of the UAE's credibility. So you really had the three parties here. You had the Russians who believe that the UAE is a facilitator, the Ukrainians who were happy at the UAE being a facilitator, and the Americans who wanted that to happen. So I think this is an important part where you're being seen as neutral. You have enough distance from this party and that party, and the most important thing also, the Americans feel that this is also a place that this sort of conversation can continue. And as we know, part 2 is coming up in a few days.
I mean, that's the point. The UAE has held talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and
Yes.
we've seen that the two world leaders there shake hands in Abu Dhabi. Part 2 is coming up. What insight can you give us in what happened in part 1 and what's expected in part 2? Because again, it's pretty unprecedented to have these three countries around the same table under one roof.
Well, I think you first of all is you build your relationships, and these relationships are not built overnight. So clearly, when you speak, for example, to the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, you've already built a relationship over the years, a relationship of mutual respect, sometimes investments, and so on and so forth. So when the time comes, you have, in my opinion, enough credit for you to play that role. This is not something that you could do overnight. And I think from this perspective also, the UAE also is not a major power. So it gives enough comfort for also these congregating groups to come in and consider this as a role where you are actually a facilitator. And I think that is an important part here. The other thing, of course, is the UAE is not an unknown quantity. A lot of these visitors, officials, etc., have been here on business, holiday, know the country, their kids know the country, etc. So I think you have a sort of brand, and that brand also plays an important part in this.
Dr. Anwar Gargash there, speaking with Monocle's Gulf correspondent Inzamam Rashid. Do stay with Monocle Radio throughout this week for more from the World Government's Summit in Dubai. But for now, here's Laura Kramer with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. The United States and India have reached a trade deal after months of tense negotiations. The agreement cuts U.S. tariffs to about 18% in return for India stopping purchases of Russian oil. Donald Trump says India will buy more U.S. energy, coal, technology, and farm goods as part of the first phase deal. Turkey plans to host high-level talks between the U.S. and Iran on Friday to cool rising tensions. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Iran's foreign minister are expected to attend in Istanbul. The talks come after Donald Trump warned Iran of possible military action over its nuclear program. Spain's government plans to ban children under 16 from using social media. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says platforms would have to check users' ages to enforce the rule. It follows similar moves in countries like Australia, France, and the UK. And NASA has delayed its Artemis 2 moon mission to at least March after a hydrogen leak during a fueling test. Engineers will review the data and run another full test before launch. The mission aims to send astronauts back to the moon for the first time since the early 1970s. Those are the day's headlines here in Zurich. Chris, back to you in London.
Thanks very much, Laura, in Zurich. Well, it is going on 12:15, almost 12:16 here in London, and we're going to head to France now, where after months of wrangling multiple prime ministers, trying and failing to reach a deal, the country appears to have a budget, at least for this year, 2026, not before Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu was made to survive another couple of no-confidence votes last night in order to get the latest compromise through. Well, for a look at the budget and all things France, I am joined now right here in the studio by Monocle writer and resident French expert Claudia Jacob. Claudia, good to have you.
Thanks for that lovely introduction.
Happy to give you an introduction. I feel like we need to mark this moment, Claudia. It feels almost like a white smoke Vatican sort of moment. Habemus budget. I mean, how significant is this?
Yeah, it's very significant. I think maybe not for the reasons that we might hope for or expect. I mean, France has seen, for a long time, but really for the last 3 months, a lot of political stalemate, and that's a symptom of prolonged political instability since Macron called that snap election in 2024, which led to a hung parliament. But Sébastien Lecornu, the Prime Minister, has forced through, and it very much is forced, a budget using an extremely controversial decree known as Article 49.3. And I have crunched the numbers, and in Macron's government, this has been triggered more than 25 times, which is pretty impressive considering what a sort of extreme measure it is. It basically allows...
It's no longer extreme in this government.
Yeah, it's become expected. And it basically means he can pass the budget without a vote. It's cited as this nuclear legislative weapon considered undemocratic, and it kind of tells you everything you need to know about the political gridlock that they're experiencing right now.
Well, nonetheless, at least he survived these no-confidence votes, which I guess one could say is tacit approval. I mean, was there in that sense, a compromise, something in the budget that at least, even if he had to use this sort of special measure, that led the other parties to at least continue backing the government?
Yeah, I guess it's progress compared to his predecessors, but the issue is that no single bloc controls the National Assembly, and so there's no majority within the government. So Lecornu has been forced essentially to placate the socialists. He's added an increase to benefit for all workers, a €1 meal for students, and abandoned plans to double medical payments. He's also abandoned Macron's plan to increase the pension age from 62 to 64, which is obviously very contentious. Arguably 62 is still extremely low compared to the European average, but it is potentially a sign of Lecornu distancing himself from Macron, which might be a sort of last desperate attempt to remain in office longer than his predecessors did.
Distancing himself from Macron and distancing himself from pension reforms that no prime minister or government seems able to get through in France. But do you get a sense of politically whether a party or person will kind of profit either from this deal and the compromise of the budget, or is this a case where the extremes who opposed it are going to profit?
Well, it was met with fierce opposition from political parties on the far left and far right, who initiated the no-confidence motions that you mentioned. And the Socialist Party has stood by the government in exchange for the concessions that I mentioned. But it's true that the Assemblée Nationale remains extremely fragmented, hasn't really solved that problem, and Lecornu will now have to work with a very deeply divided Parliament, where his centrist allies are very much outnumbered by those on the far right and far left.
Absolutely, and we're going to see what that means when it comes to the presidential elections in 2027. But before that, also speaking of the extremes, we've had some polling and kind of who's expected to be in the running for Paris mayor, because that's coming up in March.
Yeah, that's right. The anti-immigration MP Sarah Nafo of the Reconquête party has thrown her hat into the ring. It's the latest MP to do so, and the party that she is from was established by far-right politician Éric Zemmour, who also happens to be her partner, and who did come forth in the first round of the 2022 presidential election. So she now has to contend with socialist candidate Emmanuel Grégoire, who's currently leading the race with 33% of the vote, and also the current culture minister, Rashida Dati, at 26%. So we'll have to see how that goes. But she, crucially, is proposing to oppose a lot of the current Mayor Anne Hidalgo's signature policies, including building these sort of passageways along the Seine, which are 2 stories high and allow cars to go on the bottom and pedestrians on the top, which is the complete opposite of what Anne Hidalgo has been proposing this entire time.
Well, interesting, of course, to oppose something from Anne Hidalgo. She's been such a figurehead in Paris for so long now. She's obviously not running anymore. But do you get the sense, how unpopular she is as she leaves?
It's interesting because in Paris, confidence really is at an all-time low for Anne Hidalgo and kind of has been throughout the last few years. Her tenure as mayor of Paris has been marked by numerous very contentious policies, cited as the green makeover of Paris, but urban planners and civic leaders have admired her from afar for her interest in expanding bike lanes and pedestrianising many of Paris's major thoroughfares. But I don't think we can deny that she's thrown herself in at the deep end and hasn't struggled to sort of give authority to her often quite difficult ideas and changes. She was the first to swim in the Seine just before Paris hosted the Olympic Games in 2024. Vogue featured her in the run-up to the Games. And actually, we have to acknowledge that she is the first female mayor of Paris. So although she isn't regarded so well domestically, I think her international profile speaks volumes.
It is one of those interesting cases, isn't it? More popular almost abroad than you are at home. That happens surprisingly often. Well, finally, Claudia, if we wanted to move sort of away from Paris a little bit, you bring us this story of a new kind of eco-cultural village. Is that the best way to describe it? It has a distinctively Japanese flavour.
Yeah, that's right. It's in Seine-et-Marne, which is about an hour outside of Paris, and you can take workshops there from anything from mochi making and woodwork to lessons in how to make your own soba noodles. It's a celebration of Japan, and France and Japan has had like a long cultural, artistic fashion love affair. Think of labels established in Paris but which are Japanese, like Comme des Garçons, Parisian cuisine, and a big appreciation for Japanese manga, which has informed the bande dessinée in France and Belgium. So it's a long-standing love affair which continues to grow.
Continues to grow and now gives you an opportunity. It's like you don't have to go all the way to Japan.
Exactly.
Which is, debating over tourism, all the rest. Just go an hour outside of Paris.
Do it.
Claudia Jacob, Monocle writer and France expert. Thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. And finally on today's show, the world's luxury market has struggled a little bit of late, broadly stagnant in 2025. And a big part of the reason for the struggles has been a drop in spending in China, the world's second largest economy, which took a dip over the last few years in the luxury world after basically powering luxury before that. And now there are some expectations, though, in 2026 that China will return to growth. And here to tell us whether those rumors are true is Hannah Miao, a reporter at the Wall Street Journal based in Singapore. Hannah, thanks so much for coming on the show. Perhaps we could start from a couple of years ago, the history, if you will. Why did China's luxury market go into decline in the first place?
Yeah, I would say that some of the pullback in spending in China's luxury market really has to do with the property market downturn in China. Real estate makes up the bulk of household wealth in China, so any downturn in property really has a big effect on consumer sentiment. And the property market crisis began around 5 years ago, and it's really affected consumer spending. So Chinese people are adjusting to this new reality where the economy isn't growing a huge double-digit growth year after year like it was before, and the future is a bit more uncertain, and that all impacts their willingness to spend. And some of the trends are kind of aligned with global trends in luxury shopping. We have luxury fatigue because the prices of luxury goods have gotten really high. So shoppers are really questioning what justifies the cost of luxury goods.
Well, and that takes us to this year. I mean, you paint this picture of how luxury is linked to property in the wider Chinese economy. So going into 2026 then, what is your sense? What's the verdict here? Is China's luxury market, and I guess by extension, property market, in a kind of recovery mode right now?
Well, the property market is still expected to be down this year and probably the foreseeable future. There's really no bottom in sight at the moment. But the luxury market has seen some signs of recovery, at least some stabilization in the latter part of the year. We heard from companies from LVMH to Burberry to Richemont that there's been an improvement in China sales recently. So it's not necessarily that the situation with property has gotten better, but there is some sense that there is a bit of stabilization, at least in the luxury sector this coming year. But, property will continue to be an overhang. So it's not really going to be huge growth in China that lifts all brands, but just maybe rather that certain luxury brands will be able to regain their footing and differentiate themselves in the market.
Well, unpack that a little more for us, Hannah, if you could then. I mean, it sounds like the world's luxury brands are not necessarily then going to be excited by this, or only certain ones, as you say there. I mean, have Chinese consumers and their spending habits kind of changed then in ways that are going to leave at least some of the world's luxury brands disappointed?
Certainly the shopping habits of Chinese luxury customers has shifted. There is really a focus on value. People are choosier about their spending. It's not necessarily about buying the cheapest thing, but Chinese shoppers want to feel like they're getting something meaningful out of the money they're spending. So there's this emotional connection that is required for brands to build with their customers. And there's also a sense that Chinese customers are opting for beauty and wellness and travel as opposed to sectors like handbags and watches. So that makes that sort of connection and storytelling around the brand all the more important in China.
And with that in mind then, Hannah, how do you think that some of these Western brands are going to respond to that? Have they received that message? Have they understood how the buying habits are changing? Are they going to respond in kind? Are they going to change their own approach to China?
What I hear from executives about the Chinese market is that Western brands are very well aware now that the easy money in China is gone. They know that Chinese shoppers are extremely sophisticated and discerning, and there's an acknowledgement of the greater competition in China. There's been homegrown Chinese fashion and beauty brands that have been gaining market share, leaning into Chinese cultural motifs and traditions in a way that's resonating with customers. So some Western brands are trying to localize in an authentic way. They're collaborating with local artists and designers and marketing on Chinese social media. But they're also trying to articulate what differentiates them. For many European brands, that differentiation is their longevity and the heritage that comes with that. So a great example is Louis Vuitton last year opened a huge flagship store in Shanghai that's shaped like a giant ship as a kind of nod to its roots in maritime travel, which also connects with the history of Shanghai. And it's become this total phenomenon in China. There's thousands of visitors every day. There's a museum-like exhibit that tells the history of the brand, a cafe and a store. So we're seeing brands increasingly move toward this retailtainment approach, which creates this experience for the customer, brings them closer to the brand and to the history of it and the context of the purchasing. So there's a sense that just selling a product isn't enough, and that's all the more true in China, which continues to be a very competitive market for these luxury brands.
Retailtainment in China, like that. Hannah Miao, Wall Street Journal reporter in Singapore. Thank you very much for joining us. And that's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Angelica Jobson. Our researcher was Annalise Maynard, and our studio manager was Christy O'Grady. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'll be hosting. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.